Hey, Gigi, how you doing?
Hey, Chris. It's good to see you.
We have someone special with us today.
The most special.
How about you introduce everyone?
Hello, everyone. This is the most beloved Sarah. We have been friends for
Since 2011.
so
11 years.
11
Yeah.
years. We met in college. Our life paths were it kept us very, very close for a very long time. And we've just remained friends ever since. And she is truly one of the most beautiful, blessed, just amazing people in my life. And I'm so lucky to have her. And on top of all of that, she is a badass that is getting her master's degree in social work.
Mm-hmm.
And so she is here today to talk with us about our topic, but I won't jump into that quite yet.
Wonderful. Yeah, a couple things to start. One, today's episode. Actually, let me back up. First of all, we appreciate everyone who listens. Thank you all so much for everyone who comes and takes part, gives time to listen to us on whatever medium that you listen to us on. We would appreciate if you find value, if you enjoy what we have to do, feel free to share us with friends, families, others, and then feel free to point people towards us on our social media platforms at Mind the Millennial Gap on Instagram, Mind the Millennial Gap Pod on TikTok, and Mind the Millennial Gap, I can't even say it. This is a tongue twister. Mind the Millennial Gap on Twitch, YouTube, and at gmail.com. How's that?
Perfect. Chris, you did so good.
Secondly, today's episode, we are here to talk about mental health. And so I would just want to headline and say we take mental health very seriously here. I think we said that more than once on previous episodes. There's nothing light about mental health. It's something that affects most, if not all of us. And so we don't necessarily want to stay on the negativity of it all, but we want to make sure that we're sensitive to all people and all things, and knowing that mental health is a sensitive topic that we take very seriously. Anything to add, Gigi?
No, Chris and I are both big believers, like we've talked about before, and obviously Sarah is too. But yeah, we would encourage everyone to really treat this mental health as part of your overall health and take care of it. Take care of yourself. Do the things you need to. And as we'll talk about, there are resources and helps for you too when you can't do it alone.
All right, before we dive into the deep end of it, Sarah, what should everyone know about you?
What should everyone know about
And
me?
Sarah, what was the most millennial thing you did this week too?
Oh, yes.
Well,
Answer that one first. I spaced it.
The most millennial thing I did this week was stay up and stream Taylor Swift's album with the rest of the world and my millennial Taylor Swift lovers.
She crashed Spotify.
She did. I kind of freaked out because I was like, it's not working. What the heck?
Will we ever hear this masterpiece?
Yes, but then it was fine. 4 minutes later, it was fixed. And we got to enjoy it.
What were your top 3 favorite songs from the new album?
Oh my gosh, that's such a big question because I feel like it's still changing on the daily. I mean, I feel like I love Antihero. How can you not?
It's me.
I also think Sweet Nothing is just so tender. So tender. Very sweet. It's a very sweet nothing.
It is.
And You're on Your Own, Kid.
That one is track 5, which is notoriously her more kind of personal, sensitive track on the albums. And it is heartbreaking.
It really is.
The more you listen to it, you're like, oof.
Yes.
If you did get a vinyl album, or if you are going to get a vinyl album, which color of the vinyl album are you going to get?
Oh, Chris, I'm so glad you asked. I did buy the vinyl album. I chose the Jade. It was a toss-up between the Blood Moon one and the Jade one, but I saw a picture of the Jade, and when you hold it against the light, it's so pretty. Ooh. It's kind of transparent, a little bit opaque. Yes, so.
It sounds lovely.
Yes.
that wizard, Taylor.
I know.
Right?
Convincing
Marketing.
people to buy multiple
albums.
One vinyl 50 years old technology to making different colors, still making people buy them, and maybe more than one.
And it makes a clock.
Yes.
Is it a working clock, or is it just the understanding?
Oh no, you can buy 4 albums. They put together, then make the face of a clock, and then she has a stand that you can put them all on that then has a working clock hands.
I have not graduated to
for like another $50.
I've not graduated to the level of Swiftie. I'm just a innocent bystander.
I don't know. You're getting close. You're getting close.
So yes, I'm sure you were not the only millennial that waited till whatever hour of the night it came out.
No, I don't think I was.
It was 9 p.m. here. No, 10 here. And then her new stuff, I was accidentally still awake when she released her chaotic 3 a.m. surprise, which was 1 o'clock here. So, yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you, Taylor Swift, for all that you do.
Yes.
Seriously.
All right. Diving in. Okay. Sarah is here as a mental health professional. We have a handful of things to talk about. Oh, my watch apparently wants to also join the podcast. My apologies there, everyone.
Sorry, I can't do that.
We need to make that stop. Okay. Moving on. So mental health. I think a lot of people in our generation are very familiar with mental health, and I think generations prior to maybe are starting to learn about mental health. But like mental health as a whole, what do you guys define it as? How do you see it?
I see it as like just like our physical health. Our brain has emotions and feelings in it, and we need to take care of those in the same way that we take care of our physical health. So there are things that we can do for that. Like we go to the doctor, we can go to therapy for our mental health, which is cool. Or there's other things that you can do at home too. Just take care of that.
Gigi, mental health in a sentence or two. What is it to you?
Oh man, just about what Sarah said. It's another aspect of your like being, your health, your time, your one of the things you need to be aware of and take care of. And like Sarah said, with going to the doctor for your physical health and going to a therapist for mental health, like sometimes something's just like a little bit like not optimal, and it doesn't mean anything. It's like when your knee hurts, like you're not bad because your knee hurts. It's just your knee hurts. So like taking care of it is what's best for you. It helps you live your fullest life. And so taking care of your mental health is also something that can let you live your most full life as well.
Wonderful. When I was preparing this episode, I had to look it up. I think I generally understood mental health, but one of the things that stood out to me was it wasn't just psychological well-being. Not well-being. It wasn't just psychologically directed. It was also emotionally directed. I found that quite interesting how they separated the two when they were trying to sum it up and define what mental health is. And so I myself still working on my mental health. Like when it comes to psychological and emotional, like what is the Venn diagram there, Sarah?
When you say psychological, can you tell me a little bit more what you mean by that?
I think when I was reading through a lot of articles, it was mentioning that sometimes people struggle with like runaway thoughts or maybe haunted by things, memories, anxiety about having to go and do something, those type of things that maybe aren't leading with emotion. So that's what that's how I understand maybe psychological.
Okay, yeah. So maybe psychological is more something of the way that you're viewing the world or the experiences you've had that inform how you interpret actions of other people or things that happen to you. Whereas like emotions are more for lack of a better word, the feeling that comes up. And like emotions are a momentary experience. It's a sensation that comes and it won't last forever. It will continue to move through you. Whereas maybe some of those more psychological things have to do more with your experiences, your past, and just how you see and interpret the world.
Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to just like set that baseline for everyone. I know I don't know where everyone is on their mental health awareness and or mental health journey. So like differentiating those two was quite eye-opening for me. And then heaven forbid you type anything into a search engine, let alone Google, when it comes to leading with the word millennial. I would say 80 plus
Seriously.
percent, 80 plus percent leans negative or like negative outcomes that affect. And I wonder if that's just a way to get people to click on articles. It might be sensationalized. I don't know. But overall, when you just search like millennial fill in the blank, oftentimes it's not the most positive thing to read about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was looking into mental health as it affects the millennial generation and other generations, it's anything you would expect. It's not the prettiest story there. And I often wonder why that was, right? And so I picked out some themes for us to just kind of go over things that we're exposed to as millennials, Gen Zers, Xers, Boomers. Everyone is now exposed as being a part of basically an internet consumer is really what it comes down to, right? And so a lot of the a lot of the articles blame the internet as a general theme
Mm-hmm.
to the American society's like mental outcomes, right? And the internet, very powerful tool used for very positive things. However, because it is the way it is, you can post information. It can also be somewhat negative as well. And so like looking at the internet, some of the things I caught thematically was there is a theme of potential reduced self-worth as it is related to potentially like social media platforms that people, or sorry, content on social media that people are consuming. There's an outcome of loathing, and loneliness was also a derivative that was brought up there as well. And so while the internet could be a great thing, how do you think the internet potentially affects us, good or bad, mental health wise? Anyone can answer.
Oh, you girly.
Oh man. Okay. I feel like that's a really big question, right? Because I'm a social worker. There's different types of therapists, and maybe we'll touch on that later. But so social workers view mental health and looking at things through a systems perspective. So we're looking at how everything is kind of working together, right? And the internet, it plays a big part in our lives. It has. I mean, it's been a big part of my growing up as a millennial, and just the way that has changed so quickly. I even think about kids these days. I'm like, man, I'm glad I didn't have to like navigate the pressures of social media in high school. Like, whoa, that is a lot to deal with. And there definitely is that aspect of internet usage and how it can impact mental health, because a huge part of mental health is having connections with other people. And sometimes the internet can make us feel like we are having those connections in that moment. But they're kind of fleeting in nature. You know, there's that quick dopamine hit and stuff. And so I'm not like condemning the internet by any means. I think it's a very useful tool and something that can help us. But it also has to be consumed with mindfulness, I think, and we need to be aware of the impact that it's having on our mental state and our lives, how we're interacting with other people, our motivation, a lot of different things. So
Yeah, it seems like it can be put into position to over-rotate on blaming the internet
yeah,
often, and that it is the sole source for certain people as they consume different parts of the internet. When I was reading through articles, a lot of it just like social media is the problem, and it's like reduce your screen time and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Where, as an elder millennial, I can't imagine it being in high school at all either. I was not there. Social media didn't exist in high school for me, at my current experience and my age. But even as like an adult, when I see certain people are like, oh, we're living this most dreamy like van life, I'm like, oh gosh, that makes me feel a little bit bad about choosing my corporate like career path in life too. I'd like to do that, right? So I don't think it's necessarily like the juvenile experience of social media. I think it can affect us all, where we see something real or not real, contrived or like portrayed as something we would want and something better than what we have at any age, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that comparison is very real to anyone on the spectrum. I think this impacts people across all generations, and also is very much felt when people are like, "Oh yeah, look at my dreamy life," and stuff. And I think with millennials as well, there's maybe a little bit of this unique aspect of like, we kind of created the marketing machine that is the internet as well, like via Instagram and like aesthetics and everything. Like everything changed so quick with that, and then all of a sudden there's all these people that are like, look at my perfect life and all these products, right? And you see those posts occasionally that are like, remember, the internet's not real life or whatever. But it kind of the more time you spend on it, you are looking at other people's lives or these images of things, and your brain can take that and interpret it in a lot of different ways. And comparison is a very, I think, normal and natural path to go down when you are looking at those images and being like, oh, maybe I want my life to be like that, right? But we don't know. We don't know everything that comes with that, and that's hard to remember in the moment.
Oh, definitely. And I think the internet is super powerful, has changed how we as millennials and anyone, honestly, any generation, anyone that's still alive, has changed our lives dramatically, right? It's brought us information. It's brought us maybe information that wasn't available to us. We see things differently now. We potentially have more facts to make more decisions. It's faster. I remember as a kid having to go to like index the encyclopedia off of the shelf in my classroom. That's no longer a thing anymore. But what's your take, Gigi, internet wise and mental health?
Until you brought it up right now, I had never really thought of it as a factor in mental health. But I absolutely can see, like, it was fascinating to hear you guys talk about it, particularly in the fact that mental health, like, part of our mental health is connecting with other people. Because I totally feel like I'm connected to people even when I'm just viewing their stories. It's like a one-way directional something, but I'm like, oh yeah, they're my friend. Like, people I know in real life, almost like parasocial relationships you develop on the internet too. And so that, like, I've been like noodling on that since you kind of talked about it, being like, wow, how has like the need for interaction face to face or via text or something changed with the advent of social media? Like, it would be interesting to see data on that.
It would be.
Yeah.
And even one thing that it makes me laugh and think about is like, are high school reunions dying because of the internet?
You went to a high school reunion, right?
I did.
How well attended was it?
There was maybe like 80 people there in a class of 300. So, I mean, not
Pretty
bad.
well.
A lot of people still are pretty local to the area that we live. So it was well attended, but it was funny to see people. I was like, oh, I feel like I've been updated on your life because we've followed each other for the past 10 years.
Right?
Right?
Yeah.
That is super interesting.
Yeah, I'm old enough to say I didn't go to either of my reunions. One being in COVID, so good excuse not to go. But speaking of connection and being able, so I think the internet, where it potentially creates a scenario of less in-person connection. There's something about in-person connection that the professional world's trying to discover right now in the pseudo post-COVID existence that we live in. But you two are Kate Kennedy's best friends, and she doesn't even know it. So Kate Kennedy,
She
for
does
everyone
know it.
doesn't know. Well, you
does.
two do have a
She
picture
does.
with Kate
We met
Kennedy
her
when
one
she
time.
came to
We
Salt
did.
Lake. Yeah.
We did.
But Kate
Kate, we love you.
Kennedy, also a podcaster, be there in 5. And so you would have never known this wonderful person from Chicago if it wasn't for the internet. So I'm not here to condemn it at all, but I do understand through my reading and all of that how it could potentially have some negative effects to our mental health as well, right?
Absolutely. It's also like that was a great example. That has introduced like a person, Kate, and a community that really I think we live in Utah. We live in a very kind of conservative area, and that doesn't always super line up with our viewpoints. And so it's like the internet is also a beautiful place to go to be able to find a community kind of outside of your geographical area. Geographical, is that a word? Geographic area. Where you can connect with people, that might not just be accessibly around you, or you might not know where to find people. It has some upsides too that have been like really positive for my mental health as well.
Yeah, and I think even it can help you find people within your area too, because it is hard to be like, how do I find these people that have mutual interests or likes and stuff? And so I think the trick there, like the nuance of it is, okay, this is a tool that we're using, and then how do we move this from just being something that we're viewing to then it's helping our lives be better or creating relationships outside of it. It's always fun when online relationships move to IRL. Ha ha ha. In real life.
We were actually
IR.
we were on a ferry in Australia. As everyone knows, we were in Australia. I will stop bringing it up sometime soon, I assume. And we met this couple in front of us on a ferry, and the gentleman was a pilot for he was a pilot for a corporation, flew private jets. He had a lovely partner with him.
She was wonderful.
She was so lovely, and they found they were both divorcees, and they had found each other on Facebook. I assume that they were of that maybe barely Gen X, maybe more boomer type thing. One of them
Definitely
looked the other one
boomer.
up on Facebook, and they are married and enjoying their best life together.
We love to see it.
We do love to see it.
Okay, so moving on to the next item, and I think taking that loneliness factor of how do you find a community, I think when I was doing my reading, it says millennials more than ever identify as having less friends, less connections, maybe if you don't label them as friends, etc. I think a function of that is potentially the career paths that we take. Millennial generation, most educated generation, for any prior generation itself, a lot of millennials identify themselves as overworked. The last 3 years, the phrase burnout has become very commonplace amongst many people in the job in the workforce, let alone millennials. And so one article I read was talking about how the millennial career path, being educated, some stagnant wages up until recently. I won't hold that true. I think wages did increase in the last year or so. The anxiety that jobs give, the stress that jobs give, the path that potentially we were all sent on and have to rethink halfway through our careers. We all know how that affects our mental health, but let's stop here for a minute. Let's talk about jobs, right? Let's talk about careers and how that gives us potentially positive. I don't want to sit on the negative, positive, but I know a lot of people potentially have more negative outcomes when it comes to their career. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that sometimes if there's a lack of balance, that can be a really hard thing. And there's a couple of things at play here, right? So there's the job, maybe what you're asked to do for that job, if you feel supported in your job, and then also kind of this as millennials too. There are things that as society we were told as well that come into play that can really impact your mental health, and it's worthwhile to acknowledge those things as well, of how we have internalized some of the messaging that society has given us about what a job should look like or what it should be, and how that impacts us. So part of it can be the setting we're in, the relationship that we have with our job, and then part of it can be this bigger thing that like the system has made us maybe feel like we are deficient, but that's absolutely not true. But we've internalized that message that way. So
No, I think so. I think one of the anecdotes I picked up was millennials latch on to perfectionism
absolutely, yeah, I think
more.
there's a lot of that.
And speed to perfectionism is something that I see as a theme. I think oftentimes our generation, potentially even Gen Z, find that if we haven't achieved something within a short period of time, career-wise, we go look for it somewhere else, right? Very,
Yeah.
very rarely will I see a millennial stay, one at a company, two in a career, three in the same like title, more than like boomers. So a little insight from me. I used to do wealth management a career or two ago at this point, and many of my clients at that time were of the older generation, the almost retiring boomer type generation, and you'd see them be there for 20 years, 25 years. And millennials, you don't see that as much. And I think there's a lot of factors to it, but I think sometimes that perfectionism or that speed to some destination that we define as a goal or a finish line for ourselves, like, pushes that. Can you guys identify with that at all? Or have you seen it? How's that? Gigi? 4 minute thought?
Foreman, it's still cooking. So we've talked a lot about how kind of our traditional milestones are pushed back as millennials, right? Like we're buying houses later, if at all. We're having families later, if at all. All of that kind of takes some capital to build on. And as millennials, we are still getting paid kind of under market, under the same, like we're not being paid equal to the inflation that we've seen previous generations. And so it's taking longer for us to get there. And I wonder if that kind of contributes to it too. Like we have it in our mind, like, oh, at my age, our parents had a house, 2 kids, a dog. I can't afford to do any of that. And so the only way I know how to correct for that is to work harder, which kind of leads to more chance of that burnout, I would assume. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that is a really good point. That wasn't one that I had thought of. One that I thought of as you were talking, Chris, was, so, you know, I am almost done with my program to be a fully licensed therapist. Well, still on my way to doing that. But one of my teachers had to sit down with us very early in the program and said, you know, if your guys's worth is put into like the outcomes or what like you're going to get back or other people, then maybe think about why you're doing this career first off, you know. Mm-hmm. She's like, because school is a really great place to get that feedback, like you're doing a good job and stuff, but sometimes social work isn't the place to get that. And so I think speaking directly over to the job market as well, you know, I think millennials like that validation and that feedback of like you're doing a good job or something like that. And sometimes supervisors of that are older maybe like don't give that as much, or we find that we've been told that like our worth is our work, which is
Yes.
a big message to unpack because that is absolutely not true. Your worth as a human being is way more than what you do for a job and like how you create money for yourself and other people. Um, so I think there's like aspects of that as well. Like we were told a lot like, hey, you like we're doing a good job. There were a lot of like things along the way that we got like a lot of validation from, and then all of a sudden in the corporate world, I think some of us are looking for a similar validation, and it's not always there. And so figuring that about yourself can be a thing that really improves your mental health, as well as, hey, what gives my life meaning or brings joy to my life? And is it my work? Okay, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but who's determining the joy that brings into your life? So
Yeah. No, I understand. Like I've definitely lived in that world where my work success made up very much the supermajority of my identity, and I've thusly pulled back in recent years to say, well, that can't be everything that I am or who I want to be. And so I can see, and in Jillian in our relationship, I see how she's drastically different than me, in that regard as well. And so it's quite interesting. Like, here's an invitation to everyone: if you find yourself being consumed and your whole identity is a function of what you do for work, take a step back, take a look, see if that's the true fulfillment that you want. I see some people that have found their dream job in what they do, and they love waking up every single morning. I had an interaction with someone today that they work so they can pay for things, but it's nothing that they want to do or keep doing, right? And so I think there's a full spectrum when it comes to that. But let me read you a couple of thoughts before we move on from the career or jobs as far as it being a function of our mental health. Many millennials dealing with mental health problems at work say their office does not provide adequate support. Employees who work outside a traditional 9 to 5, which millennials more than ever find themselves in that position. The gig economy has made up a lot of millennials and Gen Zers. They're particularly vulnerable to depression, as are the minorities of those generations as well, including women, LGBTQ people, and racial minorities. Globally, workers say discrimination because of mental illness is more prevalent than other forms of workplace bias. And nearly half of millennials have left a job for mental health reasons themselves, right? Again, I don't want to rest on the negativity, but this is a reality. Half is what's stated. I will definitely have, there's a laundry list of URLs I'll have posted when this gets released.
Wow.
Right? So, I mean, Jillian's one of those somewhat recently. Just a promising job, very acclaimed for what she did for a company, but could no longer be in the culture and workplace that was, and had to leave. Right? And so like I see that being very common for those in our situation, right?
Yeah. No, that statistic kind of shocked me. Really, half of people, it's that kind of says, like, paints a sad light on the state of workplaces, that there's not adequate resources. There's not adequate resources for their employees, and that workplaces are toxic enough that you have to, or not suited. Like, maybe not every workplace is toxic, but is not suited enough and accommodating to be able to like help or be supportive or provide accommodations for those that are struggling. That really breaks my heart. Wow.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to rest on the negative. However, this is survey data. I don't want to paint with a mop at all.
Yeah.
But this is a lived experience for more than the minority of our generation, right?
it's a reality, and sometimes when you're dealing with realities, it's just what is there.
Yeah.
So that's what you have to look at and be honest about those facts. So
Exactly.
Do we know are more so now work for a company that has like wonderful mental health support, and through it I've been able to kind of like learn more about mental health offerings in a corporate setting, which has been very interesting. And it seems like there are like several options that employers can use that is like a contract with an outside service to provide mental health services beyond an EAP to which is a wonderful thing too.
Can you explain EAP
Oh,
as an
I'm
acronym?
gonna do a
I'm
really
sorry.
bad job on it.
Can you just tell people generally
Yes.
what it is? I don't know if they know that
Please.
acronym.
do you want to explain
you
it?
honestly might know
Okay.
a little better than I do. I understand what it is generally.
I'll be the one for all the listeners that say I don't know it as an acronym. How's that?
So an EAP is an employee assistance program. And what it typically is your employer will say, hey, within our network, we are going to fully cover X number of sessions for you for a therapist within our network, right? So you do still have some parameters you have to play with, but it's very useful.
Short term.
Short term, yeah. So you do like 12 sessions if you're going weekly. That's only 3 months, but that is great. That can get you kind of in the door without looking at the cost and being like, oh my, oh no, like a good starting place. And like I've used it. I've had coworkers use it. Like it's a really important and kind of undervalued, I think, benefit that a lot of companies offer. So here's your shout out. Use it. Milk your employers for every penny that they are willing to give you. Look into your benefits on that, because a lot of employers offer it. But there's also like Ginger is one that I'm familiar with because my company offers it. It's an online coaching program. So they're coaches, not therapists, which is a very important distinction.
Mm-hmm.
And they do text therapy, or I believe you can talk for that one too. But it's all virtual. And so there are like programs that employers have available. It would be interesting to see if more are implementing them into their like benefits package.
Yeah, I think the onset of COVID, that whole global experience that we had, my lived experience with my employer at the time. I'm not with that employer anymore. I moved during the pandemic, like many other people did. But it was interesting to watch COVID be a catalyst for positive change as much as it was a catalyst for the other side of that. And so the positive change I saw was companies doing their best to assist employees in a situation that they weren't necessarily exposed to, had an understanding of how to navigate there as well. And so the company I was with at the time definitely went forward and tried their best to provide employee assistance programs when it came to that matter. And I hope it was more than just the one I was with. I hope that was more blanketing for a lot of people and their experience there as well. But I know not everyone can work for a company that has money to provide an enormous basket of benefits there as well. I don't want to sit there and think everyone can get it based off of what their job, career, all those things are, right?
Yeah, but just a shout out again. If you do have a corporate benefits package, check into it.
See what your wellness program is.
See what your wellness program is. See what your fertility program is. Shout out, Kate. See what you have to offer and use it. Use all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Okay. Next item that that millennials have to process when it comes to their mental health. World events creating a lack of optimism was a very common theme I found, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we were to think broadly, as millennials, America has been in conflict more years that we've been alive than it hasn't. And so when I say conflict, there's more than one Middle East conflict. I remember being a young boy standing on the pier in Florida, welcoming my uncle home when his aircraft carrier pulled up, and that was the first Gulf War. There was a second Gulf War. There was the unfortunate the operation in Afghanistan for what was effectively 20 years until what approximately was a yearish ago. And so as Americans, we've been exposed to, conflict and the outcomes of that conflict. And then aside from that, as indirect, there's the unfortunate events of the Ukraine and Russia that get news media. And then there's places that don't get as much, right? Africa has very difficult situations. The Philippines has difficult situations. There's human rights conflicts. And then there's potential government outcomes, whether they're the country that you reside in or countries outside of that. And so they're saying that the year over year, 9/11 alone by itself was a very big deal that reduced a lot of optimism. And so in one of the articles I read, they said in the 1990s and early 2000s, millennials of that age, obviously younger, were more optimistic than any previous generation of that age itself. And that has fallen off drastically as the years have gone on. I don't know if I necessarily connect to all the world events as it associates to my optimism itself, but do y'all have any thoughts on that? It was very common when I was reading through stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that in clients that I've worked with, even just kind of that existential. That word's hard.
Good enough. We'll dub over it. Don't
you
worry.
know, that
Just Chrissy's voice, existential.
it just kind of that panic of like, wow, where do I fit into all of this? How can I possibly make meaningful change? Because I think that is a wonderful quality about millennials. I think we really care about existing in the world and the impact that we have on the world. But knowing everything that is going on in the world, like our brains cannot process that all the time, and prior to the advent of the internet, we're coming back around
Where there were 3 news channels
that
only gave you an hour of news a day, right? It was a lot less.
You could take things and process them, and even there was more time spent on these big world events, and now it's just like, oh, another 6 hours in the news cycle, like what's happening now, and that I think just depending on how I think where like your values align or like your desires, to make that impact, like that can have a big impact on our mental health, because it feels really overwhelming. It can really start to feel like us against the world, one person against the world. And combating that is hard. Finding hope in that is hard.
Yeah, human beings as a species, very resilient.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Proven to be resilient. But the more information that is available to us, or the more information potentially we can't necessarily avoid, can present a very daunting circumstance or a daunting reality to say, what is it that can I even do? Right? So I can relate to that for millennials that potentially find that as cumbersome to their mental health outcomes.
Yeah, and if this is something that you're resonating with, that you're thinking, oh boy, yes, I feel this panic at times in my life, there's a book out there called Hope in the Dark. It was written after the United States decided to go to war in Iraq after 9/11. So it's framed within the context of that. I was not old enough to understand the general kind of hopelessness that Americans felt at that time. But this book talks about the ways that you can find joy or like do sustainable activism to meaningfully move forward in that way. There's one line from it that I have just carried with me, especially in like the recent happenings over the last couple of years, and even like this summer, that it says, joy is an act of insurrection.
Wow.
Does
So-
that assume that
Beautiful.
joy is a minority outcome then?
No, I don't think it assumes that, right?
Okay.
It's the if we become hopeless in the face of these big events, hope is usually a motivator to resist or to want to affect change. And so if we lose that hope, and kind of accept things as they are, like, well, this is the way the way it is,
Mhm.
we are at war again, bummer, right? Like that's not gonna move us forward. We're just kind of accepting that, when really we can still find joy in these moments that feel very hopeless, and in finding that joy that gives us fuel to then resist in meaningful ways, or to be in activism in meaningful ways, right? Because it is something that will help us fill up our cup rather than continue to drain us.
And I know that I brought
That's
up
beautiful.
armed conflict as
Yeah.
a majority of my initial introduction of that. It is not limited to that, everyone. The outcomes of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, the outcomes of the Supreme Court, Roe versus Wade, wherever you sit on, it can be a social injustice that you align to, uh, as well as any armed conflict, anything like that. Just seems just adversarial things that are presenting more and more controversy is maybe what I wanted to bring up there.
Yeah. And that controversy it's something that can get us down very easily. It's easy to look at that and feel very overwhelmed. But there's also ways that we can interact with it that still takes care of yourself and hopefully puts out something that aligns with your values.
Yeah, absolutely. Thoughts, Gigi?
I just want to cry. That was so beautiful. We'll link the book in the description. We'll make sure that gets done. But I know what I'm reading.
Okay, last theme, and I
Yeah.
don't want to spend too much because it's a pretty obvious one. It really comes down to shocks to the economy. And so when I mean shocks to the economy, it all surrounds financial viability of an individual, right? And so whether that's money, lack of a job, the current inflation that we're all experiencing. This is an inflation that hasn't been experienced since potentially the late 70s. I know I wasn't even alive then, so that it's nice to talk about things with it doesn't span me because I'm a little old.
No, you're just a young thing.
But I know that we aren't lining up for gas like people were in the late 70s and those types of things, but the double-digit inflation on just regular day-to-day goods is definitely a stress and a burden.
Yeah. Have
Even
you
on
seen the
the-
cost of eggs lately?
Yeah,
Yeah.
even on the
Cool.
like higher middle income folks, I can't imagine the stress that potentially brings on those who are more socioeconomically challenged there as well. And so money, as we alluded to with the job there as well, definitely affects our mental health. And the opposite of that, I think those who find themselves financially free can also have some mental health positive and negative scenarios with some of that financial liberation as well, right? And so any thoughts there when we talk about just money as an input to mental health?
Yeah, I mean, people will be like, money can't buy happiness. I think that is partially a bold-faced lie, because there is some element of security that does really impact our mental health. Think about the stress that you would be under if you didn't know where your next meal was coming from. That would be a big impact on your mental health if you didn't have stable housing, things like that. So, I mean, there are definitely elements of money that can help us have a stability in our mental health. I mean, this book that I read forever ago that's probably now outdated because of inflation and all that, there was a study done that there was no effect on happiness once a threshold of like $70,000 like that income
When I was in
in a
college, it was a
household.
little less, but I can assume it's only more now.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't even know what that number is if it's like kept up with inflation. Like, well, that would probably be like over 100K.
CNBC
I
does
don't
a
know.
CNBC does a good
Again,
job.
I'm not good with scale.
Exactly. I think CNBC does a good job of putting an article out once a week to like sit there and be like, oh, what does this much money get you in these cities? Or what are the cheapest cities for those who are not as much, right? Again, potentially sensationalized clickbait, but it's very much a reality, right? I think our wage growth does not keep up with the demands of what is put in front of us, let alone just day-to-day consumables in our inflation.
Yeah. Well, and even you think about how the minimum wage has been raised from like 7.25 and how long.
I could
That's
do a
wild.
whole I
That's
could
really
do a
wild to me. That's
whole
probably a whole
episode.
episode.
I could do a whole episode on minimum wage needed to be set or not set, right?
Millennials and the economy.
That is boring, and I don't think that necessarily caters to our demographic. So, moving forward.
Bonus episode. Christopher.
Patreon only.
Patreon only.
But I find it interesting being in the tech sector. LinkedIn, potentially not necessarily what it used to be, but I'm constantly watching, and maybe it's more recruiters than ever in the current phase of an economy trying to teeter-totter on an American economy trying to teeter-totter on recession, and corporations preemptively reacting to that. It makes my heart a little sad every single day that I get on LinkedIn and see another company doing layoffs, right?
Oh wow! I
Or-
didn't know about that.
And I think it's maybe a little bit more prevalent in the tech sector currently because
Yeah.
the cycle of growth is a little bit faster. I'm sorry, and having to react to not as much of the growth, right? I think it gets exacerbated in that sector a little bit, and so it's quite interesting. I mean, we could come out of the house here. I could just start pointing at buildings of tech here that have done layoffs in the last like 3 months, right? And so I can see how people expressing their frustrations with it, people expressing even their desperation with it, and it's quite warming to watch how a community that doesn't know some of these people try to take them and help them find a pathway to financial viability again, where a company had given up on them, right?
People are good.
Inherently, I believe.
Yeah. I think so too.
All right. Money, very obvious thing.
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to sit on that. The next thing I really wanted to get to was the Millennial Generation is actually known as the therapy generation. They haven't put on a billboard, not on a flag. They haven't announced it, but in articles they had mentioned.
Self-proclaimed.
Yeah, they had mentioned
We're the therapy generation.
that they're the generation that most embraces therapy.
Mm-hmm.
However, I don't think that's the majority of the generation.
Mm-hmm.
From my observations only, I don't have facts on that. There seems to be a stigma associated around mental health generally, and then seeking help for mental health from previous generations. And I really don't think it's any fault of previous generations at all, but the themes that I found were previous generations were like, suck it up, power through, even a lack of acknowledgement of that mental health existed on any like spectrum,
Yeah.
and that previous generations were more willing to put faith in a higher power. And the reason I say higher power is that can be a broad thing. It could be a deity, something around religious faith. It can be a government official of any particular level of government that can come in and help save. But it seemed that acknowledgement of mental health and the acceptance to help increase or make a positive change to someone's mental health still has a lot of stigma associated to it, negative stigma associated to it that might block people. What has been your experience with that?
Well, I mean, I am deep in the therapy world, so my view might be a little skewed, I guess. I do think generation to generation, we always try and do one better, right? So, you think about like our grandparents or maybe great grandparents that experienced 2 world wars in their life and Great Depression, and there was a lot of trauma that happened to them, and they didn't what they're called, like the silent generation, right? They didn't talk about those things or whatever, just kind of dealing with it. And as we move through, I think we see kind of like a more of an opening just towards that softer side of our humanity, and wanting to do our kids one better than what we had. And so I think as millennials have grown up, I see a lot of conscious effort and thoughtfulness put into like, what do we want our family structure to look like? If I do decide to go down that path, like what do I need to address in myself so that I can be a better parent and stuff. I do think there is a lot of that stigma that definitely still exists. And some of that I sometimes wonder too is like how much of that is a function of just either like the way you were raised or like your meanings behind what it means to be like male or female, right? I think men receive a lot more stigma around mental health than females do. I think it's been probably a lot easier for females to reach out for help than men who are struggling. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of different things that could go into it. But I think in general, like, people are more open to looking at what's going on inside and, being like, okay, yeah, like, maybe I'm not having a great day or I'm not having a great time right now, right? And I need a little bit of help. And I think that's where maybe kind of that step of like coaches has come in to helping that avenue, but then also like mental health therapists and stuff when things are a little more serious. Yeah.
Thoughts around that, Cheech? Comments around stigma or stigma that might prevent someone from seeking help?
So I wonder how much of it is stigma and how much of it is like fear a little bit. So like I didn't try coffee for the first time until I was in my 20s. And there is nothing scarier than like walking up to this like coffee place and being like, everyone around me knows what they're doing. They know what these things mean when they order them.
I hope this barista's nice.
Right? Exactly. I would ask a million questions. I'm not sure how any of this works. And like, what if I hate this at the end of the day? And I wonder in some ways, like, that's definitely my experience when I started engaging a therapist was like, how do I know? How do I go about this? Like, and then you second guess yourself and you're like, well, are my problems really that big? And you just kind of get caught in this trap. So I wonder how much of it is stigma, probably a lot of it, but I also wonder how much of it is not knowing how to engage or how to find like the help that you need, or not knowing like what the right avenues are for this.
Yeah. And so I think qualified people to engage in mental health helps, or trying to increase the positivity of mental health, are more readily available than ever. The internet as a antagonist to our mental health has also empowered the scale of mental health options that are available. But engaging in formal therapy can be cost prohibitive to people. I don't know at what scale of measure that is, but it's not a cheap endeavor to go engage a qualified mental health professional.
No. And it's not supported by insurances often.
Right.
It can be hard.
And so what are what are things that people can do if it is cost prohibitive? I'm sorry, if someone acknowledges that their mental health isn't in a place that they want it to be, and they have the motivation to action to improve it, what are options? What are things that individuals can do that find themselves in that spot, but formal therapy might not necessarily be in the budget?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of really great psychoeducation out there that will talk about skills or things that you can do to practice improving your mental health. So I mean, a big skill that like I will teach early on in therapy is the skill of mindfulness, which if you go look around on the internet, you can find that skill anywhere. It's a really great like starting coping skill. Like you're just recognizing your emotions or, you know, being aware of what you're doing. And there's a lot of things that will explain it much better and more succinctly probably than I will right now.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so you can kind of look out in there. There's also tons of books. You know, there's our patron saint Brene Brown.
Yes.
She has done a ton of work around what vulnerability is, like identifying emotions. Her most recent book is called Atlas of the Heart, which goes through a bunch of different emotions and kind of how we can deal with them in like more effective ways. Things like that. There's kind of a lot of different stuff out there. I really like one. It's called Self-Compassion. There's 2 books about it, written by Kristen Neff. That is one that can work wonders on your mental health. And it's a very simple skill and idea, but that book is also like one that I would highly recommend. Just also as you peruse the internet, right, with anything, be a little bit careful. Some people will sometimes be like, hey, are you experiencing this symptom, and this system? Like, this means you have this rare mental health disorder. And I mean, there's a lot of nuance in those things, and some of those things are not as prevalent as possible, but it gets them views. So just be aware that that's out there,
Yeah,
you know?
there's a lot of that
Yeah.
formula on the internet, a little less on TV, but more on the internet of, are you not happy with your current circumstance? Insert this person's solution
The
to
thing
take
I'm
you down
selling.
a path,
Yeah.
right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, be wary if they're like selling you something. That always is a red flag.
Amazon FBA.
Yeah, but I think like those principles of mindfulness, learning about your emotions when you frequently have them, and applying those things to your life can be a really great starting point, especially if you don't know. And also, even you can call around too to like therapy offices. Sometimes they have interns that are available for a cheaper price or like sliding scale. You can ask questions about if there's any other like alternative payment options like that. Yeah.
I know often mindfulness is put together with the practice of meditation.
Uh-huh.
So as someone who has not been able to even get to the beginner level of meditation successfully, I know there are apps for that. There are practices for that online.
Insight Timer is one I love. It's free. That's a meditation app.
I know Calm is a paid
Yeah.
one, but Calm would still be cheaper than potentially going to a therapist office there as well. If meditation connects with you, that's also another avenue there. Okay. And so when it comes to maybe people who have a benefit or people that find themselves that licensed health professional is the option, like, how does someone engage in that? How does someone pick that up? And I think an additional question that if you can take this in that thought as well, because that's a broad topic, how does someone find the right person?
Oh yeah. You're right, therapist. You can therapist shop. I will start this out with therapist shopping is a totally appropriate thing to do. I tell all my clients that, hey, therapy's a relationship and I am working for you, right? And so if our relationship, something isn't working, right? You just feel like, nah, I don't really connect with her or something. I won't take it personally if you fire me and want to go try someone else, right? So don't feel like you owe your therapist a bunch of sessions to be like, oh, maybe it could work or something. If you are like vibing with them for a while and then they do something, I would encourage you to bring that up with them before just like dropping them, because sometimes therapy can also help us work through some of those things. But it's totally appropriate to, when you are first looking for a therapist, interview them. A lot of therapists will take a 15-minute consult call where you can kind of get their vibes. A lot of therapists have like Instagram profiles where you can also get kind of a vibe of who they are, how you think you would jive with them. And Psychology Today is also another great one. You can search in your area. You can filter by what you feel like you need help with. People will put kind of their specialties on there. And you can see, sometimes even like seeing a picture of someone, you're like, oh yeah, I think like maybe I'd get along with them. I don't know. Which it's kind of funny. It's like dating profiles for therapists. But yeah, that 15-minute initial call too can be a really helpful thing. A lot of places will do that like free of charge. So.
And so I don't think I'm sharing anything that isn't known. I think all three of us on this couch have had some experience, if not a decent amount of experience with therapy. I know that I myself have, I like to think, graduated from therapists onto other therapists. Gigi, what has been your experience when it comes to the just therapy journey, finding a therapist that you connect with, and those types of things?
It's definitely been a journey, and I think like what Chris said, sometimes you can graduate from therapists. My first therapist was exactly what I needed at the time. She was kind, she was comforting. She really like made me feel loved in a time when I felt very unlovable. And she was perfect. I eventually found myself needing to kind of move on from such a soft environment. And like we talked about it, and she was like, this is my style, this is how I am. And so I found a different fit therapist after that who was equally as great, just a little bit more like in my face, would tell me when I was the problem. I'm the problem, it's me. And like that was really great too. So like, just like Sarah said, I would echo that, like having the real conversations with someone, like remembering that, like, yes, they work for you, but they are a real person, and like they have feelings as well. And they are professionals and will, if they're ethical, will tell you when like, yeah, I can't support your next need. So yeah, just being honest and taking the time to really find someone. I have had lots of first sessions with people that I didn't vibe with. I've had therapists that I wish I had moved on from earlier. But yeah, take the time to really find someone that fits with you and your goals and what you need in that stage of your life, and be okay if it changes and if you need to move on.
Yeah.
Is that okay advice?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
I think
cool.
that's fantastic advice. Yes, I would agree wholeheartedly with that.
Awesome.
And a thing that you can be aware of too is there are different types of like licensures of therapists. So common ones that you'll see is like a marriage and family therapist. Like they might be more like relationship focused if that's something that you're looking for help with. There's clinical mental health counselors. They will often choose like a area of focus that they studied in their program. Social workers are very broad. Like I said, we look at kind of like the whole system, what other things are impacting your life outside of just like what's going on with you and stuff. So those are just some different considerations if you're looking online for people too.
Yeah, and I would think, I don't know how BetterHelp as a platform is accepted in the therapy space, or those who are seeking therapy. It is a little bit to a lot of it more convenient method of it, and they have also a workflow for those who are signing up or seeking or haven't settled on finding the right therapist for them. There's a questionnaire that will lead them into a handful of people that's more line up to what you're seeking there as well. So I wish BetterHelp was around when I was doing more in person style of therapy years ago.
Yeah. Some people really like that texting based therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, think about what you want, what you need, what you feel like would help you most in that moment.
Perfect.
Mhm.
I know. I don't know if anyone asked this question. I purposely left like how people cope with mental health,
Yeah.
positive and negative. I think that was a rabbit hole, and I didn't necessarily want to sit on that. But if you find yourself coping negatively, there's so many documented like paths of negative coping. I invite you to take a look, potentially recognize what that is, and then find the methods that can potentially reduce that coping, or find yourself maybe not having to use that coping mechanism anymore through a licensed therapist, or if it's cost prohibitive, finding some trusted resources as well to reduce that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that just too also made me think like, if you are struggling like very deeply with your mental health, like you're feeling like you're in a place that you might be having thoughts of suicide or things like that, there's a suicide hotline as well in Utah. There's an app called Safe Utah where you can call or text with a crisis counselor that will help get you connected very quickly to resources to help you, because in those situations often there is a bit more of like a medical attention need as well, where sometimes getting like connected in with medications and stuff quickly can be very helpful to get you more balanced. So
Yeah, absolutely. There's some very unfortunate outcomes I
Yeah.
didn't sit on in this episode, but are
Yeah.
unfortunately more prevalent in our generation than other generations as well.
Uh-huh.
And so this episode we will post somewhat soon, but as we go into the holidays, I think the holidays can bring, these fall winter holidays can bring people a lot of joy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't realize that the holidays can also have negative effects for people as well. So I think we can joke that maybe you have to go to a family event for Thanksgiving and you might not agree with everyone, but there's also the spectrum of there are lost ones and loved ones that holidays can trigger. There's so many things there. But what advice should we give anyone as we approach the holidays and making aware our mental health as we go into the holidays?
Like dealing with things, or I don't know, when you say advice is very broad.
Yeah, I would say I can pose the maybe more joking light situation of Thanksgiving.
Oh yeah.
I mean there are movies about it, there are TV shows about it. There's that relative at the table that just absolutely isn't agreeable to maybe the direction our life is going or things like that. How would you help someone think that through and protect their mental health, right?
Yeah, so one thing that I like to help people think through is just thinking through, like, what am I available for and what am I not available for? So, am I okay to entertain my uncle's ramblings about things and just sit there and nod politely, and it's not gonna stress me out or like send me into a place, or am I gonna feel so enraged and feel like I need to fight them and like leave that conversation? And just thinking about that beforehand, and making like a game plan with yourself, just so when those emotions do start like coming up, you kind of know, okay, no, I've thought through this, like this is what I was planning on doing. Yeah, so that can just be a really simple thing to do. So what am I available for and what am I not available for in this interaction?
I love that. Gonna use that.
Cool. Love it.
Awesome.
Last situation. Holidays are reminders of less happy times.
Yeah.
Like, how would you help someone think through that?
So those reminders are probably going to bring up some sort of emotion. And the best thing that we can do is feel that emotion. It's a temporary thing. Emotions aren't forever. And then we can keep moving on to the next thing. So, as Tiffany Rowe says all the time, we feel it, we deal with it, and we heal from it. So, I mean, even heading into the holidays, maybe it's a good thing to start practicing some of those mindfulness skills, because feeling emotions does require us to be mindful of what is happening in the moment and then being able to move on with that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Gigi?
No, I love it.
Wonderful. Again, when it comes to this podcast, mental health, very serious thing that we choose to take very seriously here. We definitely would extend the invitation for everyone to, one, become aware of your mental health if you haven't already, and then two, look at it, measure it. Where are you?
Poke
Is it
at
where
it.
you want to be? Yeah, poke at it, right? Is it where you want to be? And if it isn't where you want to be, if you don't find that you're in the space that you think is possible, go seek resources, go seek help.
Yeah.
We'll definitely put a lot of information in the description here. And then I'm not qualified. Jillian isn't qualified. This is why Sarah is here, obviously.
I'm
But-
almost qualified.
Yeah, exactly. But if you find yourself wanting help, needing help, and potentially just need someone to cheer you on, we at the podcast would love to do that with you.
We
Yeah.
will be your biggest hype people.
Everyone deserves a support system of some kind, and even if it's just someone saying, "You got this," right?
Totally got it.
Yeah.
Actually, any last thoughts from the couch?
Do you have any last thoughts?
No, just there's no shame in dealing with your mental health. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
So-
So, Sarah, it was a pleasure.
thank you.
Thank you for
It was so
coming
fun to
on.
be here.
We will do
Enjoy.
this again.
Yes, I'd love to be back.
We'll do this again. Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode. We very much appreciate it. And we will see you on the next one. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.